Domestic workers have welcomed the call by the Progressive Domestic Workers Union of South Africa to have a pension fund. The union wants the National Treasury to develop a pension fund for domestic workers so they can retire with financial security. The union has drafted a proposal and will hand it over to the Department of Employment and Labour this month. Now, according to statistics, South Africa has about 850,000 women who are employed as domestic workers in South Africa. The Progressive Domestic Workers Union wants the fund to correct what it calls the injustice towards the domestic labour sector. Some domestic workers say having a pension fund will be a great help. Proudhusa says the contribution structure for the pension fund will require both employer and worker to contribute. All right, now to talk more about this, we're joined by Pinky Mashiane from the United Domestic Workers of South Africa. Good evening, Pinky. Thank you very much for joining us on the late edition. It's only fitting that on the eve of Workers' Day, we discuss this call for pensions for domestic workers that would serve as some sort of a safety net for them. Just talk us through your position on this matter.
Good evening to SABC Channel for viewers. As it was in 2022 during the International Domestic Workers' Day on the 16th of June, we marched to the Department of Labour. One of the demands that we made to the Minister was to have pension fund for domestic workers. Unfortunately, our memorandum was not accepted, but we are supporting the call to have domestic workers being included in pension fund. We have seen domestic workers going home empty-handed. Others, they go home sick, fragile, old, and have nothing to show that they've worked for many years. There are those who have worked for more than 2 decades, more than 40 years, but they've got nothing to show. And also there are employers who are forcing domestic workers or cornering domestic workers to sign resignation letters when they are supposed to pay them severance pay for home. So a pension fund will make a huge difference in domestic workers' lives.
Now, domestic workers serve many households. It's something that we cannot debate. Statistics, in fact, indicate that they contribute 5.2% to total employment. Now, this may be a call by the Progressive Domestic Workers Union of South Africa, but as you stated, you've also been among, or at least you've been among those that have supported such a call. But how would the contribution model or structure look like? Because at least from the Progressive Union, they're saying the employer would have to contribute a certain amount, the employee as well would contribute a certain amount, and then government would have to match both contributions. Is that the same model you have envisaged?
Yes, that's how it's going to work. It's going to be like UIF, where the employer will contribute a certain amount and the domestic worker as well contributes a certain amount. We were also saying to the minister that he must monitor this and they must come up with a strategy on how to work on this. But it can work just like UIF, though it's still a challenge because even with the UIF, we still have thousands and thousands of domestic workers who are not registered with UIF. But we are saying we can move forward and see what's happening.
You mentioned that there are thousands currently who are not registered with UIF. Among the reasons is that you also have the reality of a number of domestic workers who are working for South Africans but don't have the correct documentation. And at times it's because their labor is cheaper, or at times it's essentially that you'd find that an employer knows that they can get away from having an employee who would make these demands of a UIF or even now a pension purely because they know that they don't even have the correct documents. So how do you guard against that? Because it's a reality that many households have undocumented foreign nationals for whatever reason, but they're the ones working in their homes and it would be difficult to register them in any form.
That's a way of exploiting domestic workers and also trying to run away for taking responsibilities as employers when they employ undocumented domestic workers. But it also includes South African domestic workers. The number of domestic workers of South Africa who are not registered with the UIF is more than the number of migrant domestic workers. So we mustn't think that it's only the undocumented or the migrant domestic workers that are not registered. Even the local domestic workers are not registered. And because of different reasons, there are no inspectors visible in private household. Employers are doing as they please. So that's why many don't even comply with the law because they don't expect anyone to knock at their gates. Others are staying in private estates where they think that they are somewhere in Orania. nobody will approach them.
To take you back to the model, though, what would be the expectation around SASA old age pension? Would the domestic workers also be willing to forgo that one once they turn 60? Because as it stands, the criteria to actually get the SASA pension precludes those who receive any other grant or pension from accessing the SASA one. So how would it work there? What is the suggestion?
The suggestion is that if the pension fund that the domestic worker is going to get, it's less than the SASA pension grant.
Yeah.
They must be allowed to apply for SASA pension grant, because it's also going to depend on how much the domestic workers is paid, because they are paid different salaries. Same as the UIF, they don't get the same amount of money. So if the money that they are going to get is not going to keep domestic worker living until the end of their life, then the domestic workers must be allowed to apply for for SASA pension fund.
So they'd apply for SASA grant once the pension, they no longer have enough in their reserves for the pension. That's when they would apply for SASA. Or you're saying that they'd apply at the same time and then get the SASA grant as well as the pension?
No, they must get the pension first, then they'll apply for SASA later. That was also another call that we made also on UIF, that we said to the minister, he must make amendments that domestic workers, when they reach the age of 60 years, they should be paid their UIF benefit. If the employers want to continue working with them, they can take them from there, because many forfeit even that UIF when they are told to resign, or they go to apply for SASA, and they don't take any other steps against the employers. So we said when they reach 60 years, the minister must make it, the government must allow domestic workers to claim from UIF.
Now, Pinky, in closing, you are a union yourselves. Are you seeing a lot of domestic workers that actually take membership with you? Because I know for a fact that my own doesn't have membership, but I'd certainly love to advise her to have or belong to some sort of union for her own protection. So do you find that a number of domestic workers are aware of your existence, and do they take up membership?
There are those who don't know about us at all, because when we approach them, they will tell us that is the first time that we heard about the union. That even those will say it was the first time that they saw me today on Channel 404. But there are also domestic workers who know about us, but who don't want to join the unions because of different reasons.
And I suppose some, it would also be fear if employers found out that some of them had some sort of a union. Maybe it would be a problem in some households. But thank you very much for speaking to us this evening. That's Pinky Mashiane from the United Domestic Workers of South Africa Union speaking to us there.